What happens when you take an Audi S4, remap it, change the air intake, upgrade the intercooler, and a whole host of other things? Well, we are going to find out. But we're also going to find out what this car does on the 0 to 60 sprint, the 30 to 70 sprint, what MPG it will really do, does a stage 1 map affect the economy figures, and we're going to see what the handling mods have done, well, to the handling of this thing. Let's get into it. My name's Tom, and you are watching Paragon Cars. So first things first, let's talk about the engine because it is quite impressive. Stock, this car makes 354 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque. Certainly enough for most people, but with a stage 1 remap, this thing has gained nearly 100 horsepower. We're now running 440 horsepower and 724 newton meters of torque. And to get to that power figure, you don't actually need to upgrade any of the hardware of the engine. However, you can do a couple of extra things which do improve its reliability and noise. The first reliability related thing that the previous owner did was upgrade the intercooler. Now, the stock intercooler on the car is fine, but as you can see, there's not a huge amount of room in this engine bay, so things do tend to get a bit hot, especially if you want to track the car. And in my mind, that is a mod well worth doing. Plus, a bit of extra reliability never hurt anyone, did it? So it sounds good, but has that stage 1 remap really made any difference in terms of real world performance? Well, now it's time to put this thing through its paces and do the 30 to 70 sprint. Let's see if this stage 1 S4 can beat an Audi RS4. On the 30 to 70 sprint then, we managed a absolutely mental time of 3.39 seconds. Not only is that faster than an Audi RS4 and RS5, it is faster than a Mercedes C63 AMG. That is bonkers. Now then, with all that power comes a lot of responsibility and a requirement for some handling mods. And some of the ones done to this car are actually pretty interesting. So, number 1, the car is lowered on lowering springs, which helps keep the car flat in the corners. But Tommy, that's not that interesting really. Most cars that are modded will have that. But there is something about this S4 that is actually quite cool. And that is that this has a metal rear differential insert. Now in the stock car, these are made of rubber, which means when you put your foot down in a corner, you can sometimes feel a bit of vagueness coming from the rear end. So with a metal one, obviously it's solid metal to now solid metal, which just means it should in theory feel a bit more solid on the rear end. Now obviously the next thing you got to do when you've got a car with 25% more power is have at least 25% more brake. So the previous owner has done his due diligence and put some EBC yellow stuff pads on this car. I do believe it's EBC yellow stuff on the rear and EBC blue stuff on the front. Why? I don't know, but apparently it makes for better braking performance. Well, we'll see about that, I think. For now though, I think it's time to take this thing onto some real UK roads and see how these mods affect real world driving. Let's get into it. So then, starting off around town, how do these lowering springs affect the suspension? Well, not actually that much. The car just feels a tiny bit stiffer, but surprising. I was expecting it to feel really racy, but it kind of just feels like, oh, it feels like an RS4 really. Still nice and softly damped because obviously the dampers are the same. And it's just nice. We don't actually have adaptive dampers on this, but I think it's absolutely fine. It doesn't feel bouncy. You're not going over bumps and getting it kind of jiggling all over the place. So the spring rate is kind of matched with the damper still. Usually lowering springs kind of ruin the ride for me a bit. Wow. Oh yeah. You feel the torque already. Even just getting above 2000 RPM. This power is everywhere. It just feels so much more torquey. I mean, A, because it is, but it feels like the torque is all in the right places as well. I find a lot of the time that, especially remaps, they can kind of ruin the torque curve and make the engine a bit laggy, and the gearbox doesn't necessarily like it. Now, the only thing that I will mention is that apparently the gearbox hasn't been remapped in this, but it's a ZF 8-speed, so I'm pretty sure it has been remapped when they did the engine remap, because 720 newton meters of torque is quite a lot for a stock ZF 8-speed gearbox. In terms of parking this thing, same as any other S4. We don't have a reverse camera, but we got plenty of steering angle, and it's quite a small car. Like, fundamentally it's not that big, so getting into a space in one go is actually surprisingly easy. And we've got nice accurate parking sensors, plus because this isn't the S5, the coupe with the slightly longer doors, it's easy to get to the first notch on the door. Right, let's get start stop off, because we do not want that. That is one thing that you can't remap, unfortunately. You can remap it out, but you cannot make it start the engine quicker. Okay, this is the first performance test coming out of a junction. We'll just give it half throttle. Good lord. Okay, this car really wants to get up and go. It's quite apparent that you need to turn the traction control off for this thing to really kind of let loose. Having said that as well, we are on Conti Sport Contact 6s, which are a very good tyre in warm weather. In very cold weather, yeah, you need to get a bit of heat into them to get them to work, basically. But don't worry, we'll do that later. Now then, we are actually going to test the MPG of this thing on the combined cycle, purely because when you remap a car, people always say, oh, it ruins my MPG and it does this and that, but you are effectively remapping the potential performance, not the overall performance. So on the motorway, you're going to be using the same amount of fuel, and today I'm going to prove that. So Audi claimed this thing will do 37 mpg on the combined cycle. On a previous test of this exact car, we did 34 miles per gallon. Now this car is stage 1. If it can match 34 mpg today on the combined cycle, then it's proven that remapping your engine doesn't necessarily affect economy figures. The one thing I will say though is that if you start upgrading things like the turbo and the pistons, turbo especially is where you are going to see some economy figure differences, and that's purely because bigger turbo requires more fuel, or will allow for more fueling. Okay, I've used my favourites button to get us into dynamic. Traction control is off. I'm going to go for a manual gearbox, because even though this is a torque converter, the ZF 8-speed is magical. I mean, look at those shifts. Ooh. Wow, yeah, you can feel the power. It really comes in quickly. And apparently this exhaust is stock, but it sounds really good to me, so maybe the previous owner was telling porkies. Oh yeah. Oh, good lord, okay. That is way quicker than I was expecting it to be. Woo! Lovely blow-off sound from the turbo there as well. Let's do that again, shall we? Oh, good noise from the exhaust. Holy moly! I'm telling you right now, this thing feels seriously fast. Like, that mid-range torque it's left me speechless. That is mental. There's no way that exhaust is stock. No way. That sounds properly loud to me. But it sounds like he's done a back box delete or something. Good lord. Okay, so I'm just going to preface the MPG test a bit. When you are on throttle heavily, obviously you're going to be using more fuel. What I meant was, when you're off the throttle, you're going to be using the same amount as you would when you're stock. So hopefully I can still prove that.
It's not looking good, Bev. It's not looking good.
Let's go into Eco, because even though this is an S4, it's still got to do the mundane driving, which, not being funny, is what most people do every day. It's only when you get on a back road that you can really exploit the power of this thing. But one thing that we should notice is that the extra torque added down low should really just help this engine stay in 8th gear on the motorway. It should feel a little bit more premium, and it should feel like there's a bit more power left in the tank still as well. Okay, so worst case scenario, coming onto the motorway, inefficiency. Let's see if this stage 1 remap affects the response of this thing. So foot down now. Good lord. Okay, yep. God, that is just that is just ridiculous. So ridiculous that I'm going to have to do that again. Yeah, this gearbox has definitely been remapped because it's downshifting all the way to the lowest possible gear. So response is actually a little bit longer, I think, but obviously once you're in that gear, you're going to get the best possible performance this engine can provide. Now then, where the Audi S4 is also very good is just doing the mundane stuff. So getting the cruise control on, you're in a nice comfy bucket seat that doesn't hold you in too much. In fact, you've got adjustable bolsters, so you can change them. As you can see on the screen there, they can tighten in a little bit, so if you're doing some sportier driving, the seat will actually hold you in. But when you're doing driving like this, you just kind of want to be comfortable, right? And this is where the Audi S4, the B9 series of Audis, was so good, honestly. But will it match its stock economical figures? Well, I think it's time to find out. Okay, so I'll admit we did use a little bit more fuel than a stock car would have done. However, having said that, on the previous test we did with the stock car, we did drive a little bit further to get that 34 mpg figure. Here we've done 27 miles per gallon on a slightly shorter journey, so it's not that far off. I will say though, the second you put your foot down on this thing, it's definitely drinking a hell of a lot more fuel. And obviously it has to, doesn't it, really? But it's all in the name of fun. And talking about fun, I think we should have some now. So let's get this thing in dynamic, get the traction control off again, get us into manual. Oh, that exhaust sounds lovely. Let's see what this thing can do. Oh my god. Woo! There's no way that exhaust is stock, I'm sorry. There's just no way. Right, let's see if I can feel the rear diff insert. Oh yeah, it does feel more solid at the rear end. Oh my lord. This thing is properly fast. Properly fast. 3,000 RPM is where it's at. I mean, look at this, right? Good lord. Third gear, I reckon, is probably the quickest. Oh yeah, that's monstrous. These brakes as well feel really nice. Definitely need them. See what this sounds like from the outside. Well, with the windows down. Oh, that is orgasmic. That blow-off noise is just glorious. I'm gonna have to do a downshift through this bit as well, I think. That is pure filth, isn't it? Absolute filth. Foot down. Good lord! That is ridiculously fast. Yeah, third gear just feels absolutely bonkers in this thing. It's a greasy day today on the road. Oh, now we don't have the sports diff, so we're not really going to be going sideways anywhere, but it does feel more planted. And that is because there's one mod that I forgot to mention in the intro. God, that noise is good. And that is the control arms. Yes, this has slightly more aggressive control arms fitted to it. But unfortunately, it's still a stock S4 when it comes to the Quattro system. And that means it's going to push wide when you put your foot down. You do have to have the sports diff as an option in this thing to get it to push sideways.
But I mean, if you took this thing to a track, you would still mince so many cars. It's properly fast. And one area where it should be really fast is on the 0 to 60 sprint. We've got Quattro. The stock time is claimed to be 4.6 seconds. What's this stage 1 version going to do? Let's find out.
0 to 60 then, we managed a very good time of 4.11 seconds. Now, to some of you, that might not seem very good, because a Stage 1 Audi S4 should really be in the 3s. But remember, I'm not counting the 1 foot rollout. If I did, it would be 3.86 seconds. But also, I'm not building up that much boost before I'm launching the car, purely because I just want to be nice to the gearbox. Fundamentally though, it's quicker than the stock time, and if you were a bit meaner to the gearbox, it would easily be in the 3s.
So, it's fast. Really fast. Right, let's see what it's like down a B road now. Can it handle the power? Well, I think 3rd gear is going to be the kind of gear you want. Oh yeah, because the torque comes in nice and fast. Oh! It's just that air filter for me. This sounds so nice. And you know what? All these handling mods have just made it feel a little bit tighter. It just feels smoother, sharper. It's like getting in a newer car. Good lord. That mid-range torque there is absurd. Okay, can we hit 60 before the corner? I think the answer is yes. Obviously. Good lord. That air intake just sounds awesome. Don't know if you saw that guy's face back there, but he kind of went whoa when he heard it. That sounds absolutely orgasmic. It's just like, I could drive this thing like this, just at 8/10, 3,000 to 5,000 revs. Yeah, that's the sweet spot for this thing. Lovely build of torque. Handling is capable. Just feels lovely. Absolutely glorious. So the real question, is it worth spending all the money on mods for this thing? Well, air intake, 100% worth it. I would do it even if the car is stock. It just makes all the difference. It provides theatre, an extra layer of noise, and it, for some reason, makes the car even more satisfying to drive. Now, the Stage 1 remap, should you get that done? Well, yeah, obviously. It's free power, and as long as you maintain the car, there is nothing wrong with doing this. Yes, obviously you're going to be using a little bit more fuel if you're on the throttle a lot more, which you will be because you've got 440 horsepower rather than 354. It just makes it way more enjoyable to drive, and not being funny, it's basically as fast as the RS4. In fact, it is as fast as the RS4. So it's a no-brainer for me, in all honesty. And the thing is, if you're not on the throttle and you leave it in eco mode and you go for a longer drive, say you go in from England to Scotland, you can absolutely do 40 miles per gallon in this thing, easily. It's just a no-brainer. Now, the handling mods, do I think those are worth it? Do you know what? I'm going to say no. And the main reason for that is that if you just get this car with a sports differential, it negates the need for all of those mods. Yes, you can upgrade the suspension and lower it, and it is a little bit flatter in the corners, and you can upgrade the control arms, but if you fundamentally want to make this car handle well, it needs to send more power to the rear outside wheel, and the sports differential is the only option that will do that. Without that, there is no point in doing all these handling mods. But this car as it is, the only thing I would do is just get that sports diff. It does just make a whole heap of difference. To drive at 8/10 though, this car is absolutely glorious. It is really glorious. Now then, there is a link for this car down in the description below. If there isn't, then obviously it's been sold, sorry. But I think it is well worth the money. It's just so nice to drive. Anyway, before I have an orgasm and talk about this car too much, my name has been Tom, and you have been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you guys on the next one. We have some fantastic content coming. I'm looking forward to it.